Good morning. This is Jeff Corintier from Arcanum Holistic Clinic, and I'm just doing actually a very short video broadcast this morning. I just have a few minutes free, and there's some things that have been on my mind. And in fact, I'm planning on doing a series of videos over the next few weeks, but I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to introduce what I'm thinking about and what I'd like this series to be about. And in fact, here, I prepared this quote here. This is a quote from Dr. Wilhelm Reich, and this is actually a quote that I come back to over and over again. It's a very profound quote for me, and actually I couldn't fit the entire thing here on the screen. Let me go back to my original source here. I'll read the whole thing. He says in one of his books, "I am trying to convince the serious reader that principles of thought do not represent a philosophical luxury, but that, on the contrary, they decide questions of life and death, health and disease for humanity." So that is in my books, quite a very powerful quote. And there are so many directions we could take that. And I think that's a lot of what we're going to be doing in this video series over the next few weeks. But I just wanted to make some preliminary remarks this morning. Boy, that's easy for me to say, right? And really kind of outline a little bit of what I'm thinking about and what this quote means to me, and really what it means to this whole topic as I think about it. So let me take that off the screen for now, and let me where shall I begin? Let me say that really the biggest idea, and that's kind of really one of the essential points of this Reich quote, which is that philosophy is not, in his words, it's not a luxury. It's not just some recreational activity we do for fun, or really geeky philosophers like to sit down and talk about these really abstract topics. Somehow they get their kicks out of that, but it's much more essential and relevant than such a frivolous idea, or such a trivial idea, the way that people usually kind of compartmentalize philosophy. They don't really think of it as serious. And kind of on a similar note, not only are they kind of discounting philosophy, but I think more to our point, more to some of the topics we're going to get into, they take philosophy as kind of, how would we put it? It's like, we look at science in our contemporary culture as being this great endeavor, the great scientific method, and we have all of the science that fills our life. There's medical science. Of course, I'll have a lot to say about that in particular. And there's, technological science and rocket science, and, all the great advances that humanity has gone through in the last number of centuries. We generally tend to thank science for that. Everything from inventing the toaster oven to the rocket ship to explore, other planets and everything. And medicine, all these great advances have come from science, or that's the way we think about it. Our culture tends to think of it that way, and we diminish philosophy in the process. And the analogy I would use, it's kind of like when like, to use an analogy, if we look at the typical way a grown-up or a parent looks at children, we at best we may see them as cute. You're like, oh, look at the cute little drawing my child made, or the cute thing they said, things like that. In comparison with science, which we see as the grown-up version of philosophy, which is now kind of kind of grown up. It's gone out into the world, and it does very practical things. Science does, that is. Whereas philosophy is seen as that child who's just still playing with childish toys and not really doing anything of consequence for the world at large. But as I say, that's that analogy, I'm using it as a comparison with looking at philosophy compared to science. People diminish philosophy in that sense. They look they look at philosophy as that very non-grown-up little child who's doing frivolous little things, compared to science, who supposedly is that mature adult who's grown up and actually brings practical value into the world. It goes out, it builds things, it pays the rent, and it puts a roof over our head. Whereas children, as I say, they may be cute, but they don't really do a lot for practical life. Anyways, that's that as an analogy. I'm going to let that stand there. I think that's very relevant to how people see philosophy. But as we go through my video series over the next few weeks, I'm hoping that we can start to overturn that prejudice and restore philosophy to the true value that it brings. It truly is. It's really what gives science life, and it's what gives science its ability to even have a method and have an ability to do anything. None of that would happen without philosophy. So anyways, that's kind of a general idea, but hold that in the back of your mind. We are going to really flesh that out over the next few weeks, and as I say, restore philosophy to its full dignity and its full application to life. So yeah, it's not going to be this side topic that we kind of write off as an old-fashioned thing, or as an archaic thing. We kind of look back at the ancient Greek philosophers, Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, all those cool cats, and we think, okay, well, they were around thousands of years ago, but yeah, they didn't know anything about modern science. So we'll take what they say with a grain of salt, and we'll turn our eyes back to the more serious topic of science. So anyways, that's a bit of the starting thought, or the overview of what I'm thinking of. And kind of on that note of the ancient philosophers, this will become more and more relevant as we kind of work through my thought process here. If you may know this, the root of the word philosophy comes from two Greek words, philo and sophia. Philo being a Greek word, one of the Greek words for love. There's many words for love, and there's many dimensions of that. But also the Greek word Sophia, which was really a kind of a Greek goddess who embodied she was kind of the goddess of wisdom, truth, wisdom, or knowledge. She was kind of that goddess. And so Philo Sophia is kind of this return to this love of wisdom, this original love of wisdom. We're all born with it. We're all kind of seeking for truth and seeking for kind of a greater sense of life and how to live our life, and how to get greater meaning out of things. But this word philosophia, philosophy, is kind of this call to go back to really the very original questions of science, which are still active and alive. You cannot do science without that original love of wisdom, right? That really compels it all. And as I mentioned, that word philo, or one of the Greek words for love, is one of many forms of love. And in particular, we'll kind of go into a lot greater detail, in future videos. But that particular form of love, that philo love, is kind of the part of love that reaches back into our kind of our individual objective desire. We have many desires in life. We have a lot of subjective desires. I want a fudge muffin, I want a cupcake, I want a new car, I want this and I want that. We have all these subjective desires that kind of permeate our life, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with any of those. But the philo is more of an objective desire, and it's that, in this case, the philo of Sophia, the love of wisdom, it's that objective desire which seeks to reconnect us back to the original source. As I say, that source of wisdom and knowledge, and what really animates our mind and our consciousness, and really kind of fills us with this desire to really unfold the world, whether that's through science, whether that's through some of the health therapeutics that we do in Heilkunst. That's a very specific thing, but in this more general sense, that philo sophia, that love of wisdom, is really, without it, we would not animate science, we would not animate our own lives, we would not really unfold anything of value or significance, but we would just kind of have kind of a plant or a vegetable existence that really didn't care, really didn't look for any meaning or anything like that. So anyways, I'm just kind of giving you a very, very big kind of overview, or kind of this animating principle of our consciousness and our knowledge. And on this basis, we're going to see that philosophy is very much alive, and we need to maintain its livingness and kind of keep it going, not only in whatever our profession is. In my case, it's Heilkunst and healthcare, and of course, there's a lot of specific things I do with that as far as science and as far as philosophy goes. But I want to take all of this to a much greater applicability to really anyone's life, and this animating principle, this animating philosophical wisdom that all of us really tap into, and we can make much better lives for ourselves, much better meaning, the more that we understand how to tap into that. So that's, I think that's kind of the biggest kind of idea I'm going after here. And let me maybe wrap up, maybe with one final example, maybe to kind of ground this and make this even more concrete. I always try to do that whenever possible. And when we come into the field of Heilkunst and the field of medicine in general, it's not, if and this, of course, a lot of people, they like Heilkunst, they come as patients and they appreciate that. A lot of people don't. They stick to allopathic medicine. They stick to the current Western form of medicine, and that's all well and good. Why do we have all these different forms of medicine? And it's not a practical difference, although that's how people take it. At a practical level, people will say, oh yeah, well, allopathic medicine, they have drugs and they have surgery, they have their techniques, and they have x-rays and MRIs, they have all those practical things, which is true enough, versus Heilkunst, which has these other practical things. We have homeopathic medicine and an approach to nutrition, and we have all these approaches to healing and living. At a practical level, that's all true, but it's not a practical difference that divides allopathy from Heilkunst. It's really this deeper philosophical difference. So whereas in the whole allopathic approach to medicine, the philosophy really comes down to a material philosophy. If you really scratch below the surface, what really makes allopathic medicine tick is a very, very common philosophical worldview that permeates modern life right now, which is that it's kind of a presumption or a belief that all of life, all of the world, all of everything we ever do and experience can be boiled down to a material philosophy. There's just atoms and molecules and how those interact. And kind of from a healthcare perspective, they would look at that as, well, the human being is just a random assortment of different molecules swirling around and bumping into each other. And so when it comes to medicine, that worldview, they believe that all that has to be done in medicine is identify where the problem molecules are, and then with a drug or with surgery or some technique, they're trying to rearrange those molecules so that they can form to a better material picture, right? It's just a manipulation of matter, which, when you come into the Heilkunst worldview, that is not at all the philosophy there. So as I say, rather than being a difference in technique, which it is as well, it's fundamentally a difference in philosophy or worldview, where the Heilkunst worldview does not start with that material worldview. They start with the human being, or understanding the human being as being really a form of consciousness. And over time, that form of consciousness will transform in particular ways. So as I say, this is not a difference in techniques or practical therapeutic modalities. We're really getting into this very deep difference in a philosophical worldview. So this is the kind of thing I want to focus on as we go through this video series and talk about the different philosophical applications, is that we can come to this deeper philosophical understanding that becomes now universally applicable. So you don't have to be a scientist or a Heilkünstler or someone who's using a particular form of science, but we tap back down into this universal human philosophy that's applicable to everybody in every life, and we can start answering the questions of our own individual life. What is the meaning of my life? Or more broadly, what is the society I'm living in? Of course, we have some very, interesting big things happening in society right now. I'm not going to name them by name, but wink, wink, I think you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, getting back into those deeper philosophies really help us to navigate when we're in some more troubling times, which I think we can fairly say we're in today. And yeah, what we come to both in Heilkunst, but more broadly, just this greater understanding that, human life and how we go through our life is really an unfolding of certain archetypes of human consciousness. So it's kind of funny when I say archetypes of human consciousness, we might think that we're talking more about analyzing a Shakespeare play or something, but in fact, we're getting to some of the deepest layers of science and philosophy, when we talk about things like archetypes of consciousness, those are the things that really animate them and make them tick. So yes, this is a very deep philosophical approach. It's a deep scientific approach, but I think it's something that applies not just to philosophers, not just to scientists, not just to Heilkunstler, but I think this is something that can really animate everybody's life and give more meaning and purpose to how we live our lives. So stay with me, wherever you're watching this, just kind of stay tuned to that particular channel, whether that's YouTube or Facebook or wherever you're seeing this. And I'm going to continue to develop these thoughts over the next series of weeks as I explore these topics in greater detail. And I hope in the process we can find that maybe we're going to make philosophy fun again. It's not going to be abstract and boring, but we're actually going to bring it back to life and make it useful in a very day-to-day way. So as I say, stay with me, and we'll see you over the next few weeks. And that's all. As I say, follow whichever channel you're watching this on, and we'll see you again soon.